Have that conversation with Pawan Goenka. He's speaking exclusively to Ronojoy Banerjee, so let's cut across to that.
The government had been in place for some time, but people were, were sort of restlessly waiting for those reforms to happen that were sort of slower to come back. But we've seen some big announcements coming in the last few months only. You've seen a change in the tone and tenor about India?
I think the last 12 months have been good in many ways for India. Of course, the headline is the monsoon, and a good monsoon always brings smiles on the face of everybody, whether you are in that agriculture field or you are not. So that certainly helps. But the way I look at it is the year before was kind of lost year. Things that should have happened didn't happen. And in the last year, the government kind of figured out how to manage the political environment and how to get the big reforms passed. And therefore, the GST, the big bang reform that we always been looking forward to, finally did get passed. And that, I think, in itself has created a positive mood. The change that has happened in RBI, and with that, the sort of more of alignment between government and RBI to look to growth. And that's the signal that we see in the policy rate cut of a growth focus, while keeping an eye on the inflation undoubtedly, and that one cannot take eyes off of, but making growth a priority seems to be what's coming out. So if you add it all together, right now, India has to be sort of looking at itself sitting in a very comfortable spot. We have space in fiscal as well as monetary policy. We still have a space to go another 25-50 basis point if inflation continues to behave. We still have sort of consumption stimulus that's happening because of 7th Pay Commission. We still have very high government investment on infrastructure, on defense, on railways that's happening. So if you put it all together, I think Indian economy certainly...
So using an auto terminology, the government has now pressed the accelerator. We are on the 5th gear.
Press the accelerator, and I guess all systems are running parallel in a positive direction. So I think it has to do well. Having said all of that, I think there's still a skepticism whether all of this will come together. Okay. The GDP growth of 7.1 in the first quarter was a bit of dampener. IMF is now increased the forecast to 7.6, which doesn't surprise me. I think if you look at trade, if you look at policy reforms, if you look at the fiscal and monetary space that India has, I think it is reasonable to expect that India will see a good economic growth, GDP growth. But still there is some skepticism.
And we'll talk a little bit about this consumption sort of boost also that we are seeing. But, Vinod Dasari was also here just a short while back, and we were talking about, how the government has been trying to make up for the lack of private investment. But in a country, sir, where over 80% of investment is led by the private sector, how long can this government do this? And importantly, what sort of a long-term effect will this have? We're seeing gross capital formation in the private sector being much below. It's about 26-27% as opposed to 33% 5 years ago. When do we see private sector investments also coming in?
It's going to take some time. So you're right that the investment cannot be dependent only on public sector. That cannot support the economy. It has to be private sector investment. There are 2 or 3 factors that are coming in the way. The biggest one, in my opinion, is the fact that most of the manufacturing sectors are still running with unutilized capacity. And overall, the figures I hear on an average is about 70-75% utilization. And I think you start seeing investment once you reach 80% plus.
Okay.
So if we have one more year of demand growth, then we'll get into the zone of where there is a need to invest in capacity. So that's one factor. Second factor is leveraging of balance sheets, which is getting corrected, but is still not out of what one would call a concern zone. And therefore, that correction of balance sheet has to happen both at the banks as well as the industrial houses. And the third factor is still there's a credit issue that needs to be corrected. So if these 3 things come together, and it will not happen overnight, I would think that we need to see one more year of correction in all 3 areas, and then we will be ready for...
So then specifically about your industry, then you're still in a wait and watch mode right now. I mean, if demand is so we are seeing a demand pickup with the festive season now, but if this demand continues next year, that is when we will see those investments coming in. But still wait and watch.
That is correct, because investment cannot happen unless there is a demand.
So So it's interesting you're saying capacity utilization is still about 70-75%.
On an average, that's the number I hear across all industry segments together. There will be companies that are fully utilized, there are companies that may be less than 70%, but on an average, that's what I hear.
Then what happens, because with tractors, you have a real pulse, on the economy. Monsoons have been better, even though 150 districts are still facing drought, I am told. But tractors have seen a good volume. So overall, far more optimistic from this October to December period.
Well, let me connect tractor first to the last question, then I come to this one.
Okay.
3 years ago, the tractor industry had planned for a market size of 700,000. So investments made in capacity were to produce 700,000 tractors. This year, in spite of all the growth that we're talking about, will still be below 600. So you can imagine how much extra capacity there is in tractor industry, and therefore you will not see any capacity investment in the industry. Now coming back to your question, as I said at the beginning, that monsoon has been about as good as it can be, and people look at 2% plus minus. That's not the headline. The headline is the special distribution. The headline is temporal distribution, and both of them has been really good. You're talking about 150 district being drought, but that if you look at any given time, even when we had 15-20% excess monsoon, you will still see districts under drought. What's more important is which districts. Okay, if the districts that are under drought are the districts where irrigation is very good, it does not really affect. Now, which are the drought areas this time, or the low rain areas? Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, and all three states are the most irrigated states in India, and therefore the effect of that is on agriculture is going to be low. So one has to go one level deeper to really see, is it really bad news or not? Okay. The reservoirs being very good, the storage, which bodes very well for next year, because if reservoirs are down, then you have problem that will come up next year. There have been very good late rains that we have seen in the last 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, which will have a very good beginning for Rabi crop. So I think in the last 4 or 5 years, since even though 2013 was a very high rain, high monsoon area, last 3 or 4 years or 5 years, I have not seen the kind of positivity that connects to monsoon as good as it is today.
Okay.
At the beginning of the year, I had said that India cannot afford a third bad monsoon. And if that happened, we will all be in very bad shape. Fortunately, that has not happened, so I think we are in good shape. Now, what is the reaction to that? Reaction, the immediately that one sees is in how much sowing that is happening. And the sowing is higher than what it was even in the best rain of 2013. Okay. It is in how much tractor sales that are happening. In the first half of the year, the tractor industry has grown by 20%.
Right.
Okay, higher than what the most optimistic assumptions were at the beginning of the year. Right. It looks, if you start looking at what's happening to goods that are connected to rural economy, like motorcycles growths have now come into double-digit growth after a long time. Okay. If you look at sort of the four-wheeler growth typically would come after harvest, because the first investment will be in tractor, second in motorcycle, and third in four-wheeler.
Right.
So I think that rural economy uptick because of monsoon, you're clearly seeing the sign of that.
And
There's
first
no
clear
doubt.
signs in 4 years. I mean, at least the
Tractor.
most pronounced signs
It's tractor. I mean,
in 4 years.
the-
So do we expect one of the better festive seasons than in the past for the
Well,
sector?
look, this is very hard to comment on because many factors come into this, and festive season, one shouldn't look at month on month, because this year festive season happens to fall in the month of October, complete. Navratra started on 1st of October, Diwali is on 30th of October, right? So therefore October sales, if you just look at October, has to be higher than last year October, because last year the festive season was split between October and November. Okay. But if I look at the total festive season, starting from 1st of Navratra to end of Diwali period, I do expect that in all the industries that I'm aware of, one would see a better volume than last year. 10% better, 15% better, 20% better, hard to say, but certainly we will see that.
Let me get you talking also about the broader headline or the big news item in India is because of the Indo-Pak tensions. And do diversified, globalized businesses like yours now, is it becoming increasingly imperative for you all to take these geopolitical risks also into account when you're coming up with business models?
See, today in business, the whole science of risk management is becoming more and more important. Okay, so when you talk about risk management, we make a 12-month budget plan. Used to be 5 years ago that you make a 12-month budget plan and you will more or less hit it within 2 or 3% here and there. Today that is not so because there are too many external factors.
Okay, well, that's the management of M&M talking to Ronojoy Banerjee.